Well, we played them all.
We did. All three.
All three. I think we should talk about them.
Trifecta.
Nah.
Trifecta spans now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in.
We spanned the trilogy.
Spanned the trilogy.
Spanning the
I like
ages.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Spanning the ages. I love that. Okay. Yeah. All the span games. Let's give them a look.
We kind of winged it.
Is
Wow.
Finspan right side up?
Yes.
Yeah.
We work behind. Pull up a chair, my friend, because it's finally time for Games and Traits.
I'll buy you a drink.
What's I like we just came right in on that.
That's right.
Perfect. So we played all the span games, just so you don't have to, because maybe you want to after watching some of our videos. So
Yeah.
yeah, all in all,
Yeah.
we played them all. We've definitely got some opinions, and I think
Us? No.
yeah, no, I have no opinions about
Opinions?
anything ever.
Loud opinions?
No.
Opinions are only valid if they're loud and belligerent.
Yes. That's fair.
So tonight you've got Rick
Chad.
And John.
And Nick.
and Nick, who's off
Off
camera
camera.
per his wishes, as
Yep.
always.
He's too
Screw
large
you
for
guys.
life.
He's in
doesn't
the
fit.
he's in the witness protection program.
That's right.
We came up with his backstory.
He doesn't fit in the house. He has to
They're,
through the
they're
window.
currently editing my voice. I don't sound anything like this.
True. So let's talk about each game first. We'll give it a couple minutes, and then talk about like where they all kind of fit in your collection.
Are we going to start with the OG?
We have to start.
Oh,
with the
yeah,
OG.
we
Yeah.
gotta talk
We have
about
to start with the OG, and that's Wingspan.
Wingspan.
Well, you know what a great game. You know,
Yeah.
from a design perspective to just like drop that on the table. That's pretty impressive to come up with that kind of design. It's very well done.
is.
The art is awesome. There's a lot of like elegance to the game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those games that you can play competitively and you can just really enjoy it and not be competitively. And you can play somebody that's being competitive while not being competitive and have a great time together.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so pretty. And
Such a pretty
so
game.
pretty. And informative about birds.
for all the
I feel knowledgeable
for all
about
the
birds.
ornithophiles out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
We've got birds on birds.
Which
on
I
birds.
will say, that was one thing I missed about Wyrmspan, and I appreciate that it's back in Finspan.
Invincible,
Yep.
absolutely. The ichthyophile.
There's a lot of things I missed
For the ichthyophiles.
that
Ichthyophiles.
Wyrmspan left
I don't know
me.
if anyone's
Thanks
truly
for- But yeah, I think that the biggest things for me about OG Wingspan is if we look at it from like a theme and a component and just a gameplay perspective. Like, theme of the game is great. I think
Yeah.
it really hits all the notes on being a game about birds and like bird watching and bird feeding, and just everything about the game is advancing, bringing the birds into your habitat and studying them. And I love that about a game when it walks that really nice fine line of having a well implemented theme.
Yeah, and the theme is really well implemented in a lot of different layers too, because you got the different habitats,
Yep.
and they all kind of make sense. You have the different nest types; they all make sense. You got the different sizes of birds, and that all makes sense too. You got the predator functions.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And then some of them, like there's like there's like birds that don't have their own nest and they lay in
Yeah.
other people, and they've managed to put that into. So there's a lot of little flavor in there based
Yeah.
on reality that I like.
So Chad, after we played Wingspan, you made like a really neat point about the difference between theme and flavor. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that right now in the context of Wingspan.
Okay. What did I say?
Great. So this is what happens when we don't do it right after a game. But you were talking like about how theme is like the birds, right? Theme are the fact that we have birds, we're attracting them using
Sure.
different food.
Yeah.
But flavor is the execution of the mechanics into the bird theme,
Yeah.
right? Like so we use
Did
like
I say
predator.
that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Wow.
You're very smart sometimes.
I thought, yeah. I don't remember it.
But I think that's a really neat fine line that Wingspan walks, in that it has the bird theme, but it's not just stapled onto the game. There is a lot of bird flavor too, where
Yeah.
you've got not only the like all the raptors, like all the predator birds, they eat smaller birds, and that scores points. And then the different kinds of nesting birds score points differently. And I think it's just a really nice harmony between the theme and the flavor of the game.
Correct.
This is an accurate statement.
All right. So from a gameplay perspective, I think that one of you said, I think it was Chad, you said a great word earlier, and that's elegant.
Yeah, the game has a lot of elegance in its design.
And generally, I think elegance is like when we talk about design, it's an overused term, right? Like I think people, when they see a mechanic they like, they call it elegant without it actually meeting the criteria. But
right, people try to get a little floral about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's graceful.
But I think elegant is just a great descriptor here. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's why I use it. I think it's an appropriate term. There's a lot of elegance to it, and when I say it in that context, I mean, there's a lot of good subtlety about it. There's, it's nothing's ham-fisted, nothing's just shoehorned in. There's a lot of thought into how those mechanics work and why they're, the theme is driving the why of creating those mechanics, and then they implement them in a way that makes sense and just kind of works. So,
yeah,
definitely feels like a labor of love.
Absolutely. So. For those like our watchers that might not be as plugged in as a degenerative or as big a degenerate, I guess is a better term for me. So Wingspan is Elizabeth Hargrave's first game, and she's actually made a couple of other nice games since then. But I think so. I've heard before that I've read before that there's a thing about your first game is a labor of love. Like it's something that maybe some designers develop for years before it actually gets published. And then maybe subsequent games are a little bit more rushed out. And so I think there's something to that. Since this is her first game, it's something that she clearly spent a lot of time on.
Yeah, I think
it's really well realized.
I mean, that's why there's a sophomore curse in music too, because same thing when you have, a killer debut album, you've made a lot of music and you've worked on it for years and years and years, but then when you finally get like a record deal and you actually have the first published album, that one's got a lot of work put into it. And then you got a year or two to come out with another one. And it's a much different thing from having 10 years to work on something versus one. And, you learn from that first one, but maybe it doesn't have as much passion or polish to it.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's true probably across all art forms.
Yeah. There's an element of needing to get something out instead of just putting in the work and the labor to make something that you really, really love.
Yeah, and as a counterpoint, just to play off of what you just said, any kind of art that you're doing, that's a good way to get good at art is to focus on just getting stuff out. Not necessarily published to the world, but, if you're, whatever your art is, if you're doing that every day and you're finishing something, not just like kind of half-assing something, but if you're actually finishing something every, so often, if you can do something every day, if it's writing a short story or, maybe it's a week or a month to do a painting or something like that. But as long as you're developing your body of work, that's going to hone your knife so that you can actually make the good thing. Yeah. When you do have a good idea or something, it comes out better.
For a good illustration of progress over perfection and just get it done, see our first playthrough video of Wingspan.
Yeah.
Because that was definitely a learning experience.
I'm going to crash the camera. Ready? Woodcock.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
It's died.
No, we're still here.
And we're back.
We're back. We're back. It did not. Nick's Woodcock.
No
did
Woodcock
not
crash.
This video.
My great white shark nearly crashed the Finspan.
Yeah.
Video,
Yeah.
And it did. So I think one more thing about Wingspan before we move on is that the thing I really love about it, and the thing I think I love about games like Wingspan, is that it has a lot of easy to learn, difficult to master. It has a lot of that kind of DNA. And so it's a game that lends itself to a lot of different kinds of gaming groups. Like I have played Wingspan with my wife, my mother, my more hardcore gaming group. It's a good for all seasons kind of game.
Yeah, there's really something in that game for everybody. You don't, there's enough that you can dig your teeth into if you really want to play competitively or like you really want to try to build the best engine you can.
It's easy to engage with.
Yeah.
And then you can also just like, oh, cool bird.
Yeah.
Hey, that's how I play.
That's how I play. Cool bird.
Time out.
Yep.
Ooh, a bird.
It's a great way to play.
Yeah.
Also, I can't talk about Wingspan without mentioning how awesome the soundtrack is for the video game.
Oh my gosh.
It's so good.
One of the best implementations of a digital board game I've ever played. If you haven't and you really want to engage with the game, 100% it is worth your time.
And one of the best video game soundtracks of all time.
Negatives about Wingspan. Honestly, I think not a ton. But do you guys have anything, any kind of like thorns to the Wingspan rose?
About the only thing I don't like about it is the rolling for resources. I wish there was a fix to the curve.
The what?
Rolling for resources.
Rolling the
resource.
dice for resource.
See, and that's a minor complaint.
I think that adds just enough I think it adds just enough randomness. I hate a lot of randomness in games
Yeah.
personally, but the absence of randomness also isn't fun
True.
for me.
Yeah.
So
When games are solved, it's
there,
it's kind of an
yeah.
issue.
So maybe there. I mean, there's times where it can be frustrating when you're like, I really need a fruit. But you can always do the two for one. So I mean, there's always a way
Yeah.
out.
But if
So
you're
I don't
doing
mind
that,
it as much.
you're getting put behind because there's
For sure.
almost
Yeah, for sure.
again minor complaint.
Yeah.
You'll see in our playthrough we do it multiple times where we trade
I think
resources. for
another
one that we
minor
need.
complaint, and this is known as like the big raven and the killdeer are both a little bit OP,
Yes.
and so there are games where if you get those and if you get them in that first round or whatever, the first season or whatever they call it, you can really just run away with a game.
You just activate them over and over
Yeah,
and over.
well,
and
I think
over.
That's pretty known though.
Yeah, I think more generally, if we're nitpicking about it,
Yeah, yeah.
and again, I think the game
You have
all
you have to nitpick.
you have to
Yeah.
nitpick
if you're
to
gonna
find
come up with
like,
anything negative.
yes. It's if you have to pick something, maybe it's the variability. Like you can have very strong starts to Wingspan that are based really just on the luck of the draw. But I mean, that's every deck builder,
Oh,
every
absolutely,
game
yeah.
with deck building elements. Yeah, so if I like had to look for a negative, I think that's it. But like between the what's in the base box, the expansions, like the replayability is there. Like you can play a lot of Wingspan, and I have. And it's one of those games that anytime someone says, "Hey, you want to play Wingspan?"
Yeah.
I almost never. I don't think
I've never said no.
Never
The
said no.
expansions add some cool stuff too. If for no other reason than just the flavor of the different regions in the world where
Yeah.
birds coming from. So you
And
can learn
more
about
birds.
Asian birds or whatever, but also like the other colors.
So
like
educational.
I kind of forgot that some of those colors weren't in the base game.
Yeah.
Like the gold and the pink, and I'm not sure what's in which now.
Yeah.
but
Like that was the thing when we played the base
I
game
think teal
here.
was one too. In one.
I hadn't actually played the base game of Wingspan in a minute, so
Yeah.
that was an experience playing it
Yeah.
all over again.
I was like, why don't I have any of whatever color it was? I don't
Yeah.
remember. Gold maybe? I don't remember. But
So let's pivot now and let's talk about Wyrmspan.
Not my favorite by a lot.
I think it's the weakest of the three by a margin.
when
Worth a play or two.
When it was first announced, my first thought was that it was. I hate to say the term because it's overused, but my first thought was kind of a money grab. Like
Cash grab,
we had this
yeah.
crazy this crazy successful game that's amazing, and then like let's do a riff on it.
Yeah.
And some of the things that you really love about Wingspan just aren't in Wyrmspan, like learning about something because all of it's made up, which is fine. I mean that's cool in its own right. I guess adding the babies was kind of a neat mechanic that was
Neat
new.
innovation, yeah.
I didn't like the caving. I didn't like that there was no actual span to the worm. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did
Like,
away with
I don't
it was just small, medium,
understand.
and large.
Right.
Which,
Yeah,
yeah.
which again, I think
you're just making them up.
to,
Might as well
to
put some
jump
stats
forward
on
a
there,
little
too.
bit. Finspan also has small, medium, and large.
It felt
but
a little
has
phoned in
full
to me.
But it has sizes, yeah.
on their cards,
Well-
which they could have done with Wingspan. Because you measure what Dragon's Wingspan in anywhere from
Yeah.
inches to feet. Like you
I don't
could
know why
easily
they
done
wouldn't.
that. Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't do that.
Like,
So I'm going to say something that you guys have heard me say a couple of times, but I want to say it for the channel so we can get the discussion in. Like, I have at several points referred to Wyrmspan as Wingspan for tryhards.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because there are a lot of mechanics that are added to Wyrmspan that they feel like they were added so you could add mechanics.
Yes.
Like the dragon
guild.
The dragon guild. I kind of like the hatchlings, how they work on kind of a little different axes. The caves are just feel like
Caves, I like the
Additional-
idea of. I just don't like their current implementation.
not my favorite.
I feel like there needs to be some sort of mechanic that makes them feel a little better than homework. Because that's all they are right now is homework. You have to place a
Yeah.
certain number of caves. If you happen to draw a really good one, cool. If not, you're just playing it to move.
Well, they pretty
forward.
much all give you a bonus, though.
Yeah, but some of them aren't that great. Some of them you
Sure.
just put down just to move forward versus
Sure.
there's the odd one out that you were like, this plays directly into my plan. I'm going to win
Yeah.
more.
I mean, you made that comment before last time we had this conversation, and I don't think that's getting posted, but
No.
and you both
Because
kind of
I
agreed on
killed the
that.
entire video, yeah.
You both kind of agreed on that, and I didn't, and I really didn't see it, and I thought a lot about it after, and I still have no idea what you guys are talking
Yeah.
about. I don't feel like it's try hard stuff. Like it's a different set of mechanics, and it was definitely designed a different way. But none of it feels. What was the word y'all used before? Like there was like
phoned in. It
No,
felt
like gritty or something, like chewy or crunchy.
Crunchy.
Yeah, I just don't really feel that way. Like there's different mechanics and maybe there's more. Maybe I'm not sure.
To me,
But they just feel. I mean, they just feel like part of the game to me. Like they flow
fair.
to me. I'm not saying that they're great, but I didn't really feel like it's a try hard or crunchy thing.
coming off the back of Wingspan, crunchy's probably not a great word to do it, but coming off of Wingspan into Wyrmspan feels like going from I don't know, like going from.
It feels like the elegance has been
developed-
removed.
Yeah.
Elegance
Has been removed. It feels like going from a fully developed game back to a game that is still.
It's definitely got
revision or
rough
two
edges.
off. Like it feels like going from to make a video game analogy that may lose a few people. It feels like going from like fully released Wrath of the Lich King. Everything has got its kind of edges filed off. It's designed as an experience, going all the way back to no pubs, 40 mans, vanilla World of Warcraft.
I would say I agree
the
with
mechanics
that.
feel rougher, and there are more mechanics.
Yeah, I would agree
But
with
they
that.
don't
But
feel good.
I'm going to expand on it a little bit
That's fair.
and say that you said like it feels like a revision or two off.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of implies like it could have been refined more and
Yeah.
been better. But I think it's more like, sometimes I'll have a great idea for a song and I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then, you work it out and you write the song and the song's finished and you're like, this kind of sucks.
That's fair. Yeah.
And so it's not like another revision isn't going to help it. It just didn't work out. And that's okay. It's
I
still
don't
a good game.
I would feel bad for
absolutely.
people that played it first, and then if that turned them off to Wingspan and
Yeah.
Finspan,
Yeah.
because
true.
oh my god, they are so much better.
Yeah.
Like if
yeah.
I was material used in Wyrmspan, I would feel bad that I wasn't used in Wingspan or Finspan.
To be clear,
It's not
I think
that bad.
I think
It is
Wyrmspan-
that bad.
I think
To you.
Wyrmspan is a good game. It's a totally
Yeah.
fine game.
It
It's
is
not
totally fine
it's not
game.
bad at all.
It's totally fine.
And
game.
Solid set.
We're holding it up to games that I think are
Correct.
You're comparing
I think-
comparing a mediocre game to good games though, and there's no reason to play a mediocre
Well,
game when you have
I
good
don't know.
games
I wouldn't
on
even
the
say
table.
mediocre. I'd
So
say
I
two
would.
good games or one good game to
If
two
you
great
like
games.
dragons,
I like
Yeah.
Dragons.
then you should play
I
Wyrmspan.
liked the art on the game. I just
Yeah.
wish it was
Yeah.
more.
And I
The
think
art was
that's-
great.
Yeah, that's where like a little bit of the disservice that we're paying to Wyrmspan right now is we're comparing it again to what I feel are two better games.
but to be fair, it stepped in a room with it.
Correct.
Yeah,
know,
no, that's fair.
yeah.
That is
Like,
totally fair.
it stepped in the ring with both Finspan and
Yeah.
Wingspan.
So
Yeah.
now, the one quick thing I want to do, because I don't want it to get lost in this discussion, is like when I say crunchy, when we say crunchy, like I like crunchy games. I like games that have like something
Yeah.
to sink my teeth into, that mechanics I really have to think about,
I'm an Unga Bunga
interesting
gamer.
decisions for me to make. But I think that if they feel like they're stapled on, as opposed to when they're part of a cohesive game, that's when I kind of lose. That's when I kind of lose interest, and that's like what I would call like not great crunch versus like really good crunch.
Yeah, and I think the disconnect there for me is that crunchy is something to sink your teeth
Yeah.
into. You kind of have to strategize more. And I don't feel that way about Wyrmspan. Wyrmspan still has just like a flow, like you just kind of play.
Right, which is
For
totally
me.
fine. Like again,
Yeah.
I think we're comparing it to something that clearly some of us like more than other things.
Yeah,
and there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with that. It's just
It's
again,
the Iron Man 2 of the genre. Like it's not great comparatively speaking.
yeah, we're comparing Iron Man
Whiplash
2 to
is a
like
great villain.
Civil War, like Captain
Yeah.
America Civil
Yeah,
War. like,
Wyrmspan is a great one to play first because you could play it and
Correct.
you could just enjoy it or whatever. But then,
Well, like
Then play Wing.
Witcher 1 versus Witcher 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely play it if you enjoy it. No shame, no fault
Yeah.
if you enjoy it.
it's
I
a
do
good
enjoy
game.
it.
It's a good
Yeah.
game.
But if you start with Witcher 3,
Yeah.
it's tough to go back to.
It's
1.
really tough to go back to one.
So okay, real quick, like first for me, like the hits in Wyrmspan, I think the components are great.
Yes.
All of these games have excellent components. Like,
Well, we have the expanded components to all three.
yeah, but even the base game is still pretty.
Oh,
good.
are they?
Yeah, Wyrmspan wins out on having the cool coins. I mean,
Yeah.
The coins are very.
Yeah.
Be-
I do
Actually,
like
that
coins.
is the thing, and I'm glad. Thank you for saying that because that is my favorite thing about Wyrmspan is that
metal
you have
coins.
control
Metal
over
coins.
your action economy.
and you can get more.
Yes,
get more.
I really like that.
yeah, that is my
That's
favorite.
my
thing
that's
about
my biggest
Wyrmspan.
plus to that is
Yeah.
you can combo a turn and go from 6 actions to 10.
It can
Right.
it
You can
can be a
also
little
go
bit of
into your next
feels
turn
bad
with
if you're
spare.
sitting there, you spent your 6 coins, and then somebody else is on like action
Yeah.
10.
Hey.
But
It's like, what happened? Don't worry, we'll have
But,
video
you know,
out of
I still think
eventually,
that's generally a net positive is when you have agency, like more agency over
Exactly.
your action economy and like your sequencing really matters.
Agency is incredibly
I think
important
that's
for me,
great.
which
Yeah.
is
So that's my favorite thing
Yeah.
about
Oh,
the
yeah.
game.
every conversation I've had about games I hate
Yeah.
is you don't have
Right.
agency.
You don't have agency.
the game or another player can take agency from you
Yeah.
permanently.
But then
Yeah.
for me, the negatives
That's
are
miserable.
I think the theme isn't as strong.
I think the art's not as strong.
The art's definitely not
I
as
know
strong.
you said the art's good, and it is, but
It's good.
It's a different. It's Tolkien-esque. Thank you. Art instead of the scientific art that is. You would
Yeah,
find the
it is a
Wingspan
fantasy
and
setting,
Finspan
so-
art in an encyclopedia next to the entry with a scientific term for whatever the
Right.
animal is. This is very much clearly like a Tolkien reader's guide to dragons or something.
Yeah.
It's more fantastical because they aren't real. But I would have
because
preferred
it
a
is.
more realistic look at.
it would be cool if they treated it the same way. Like,
Yep.
here's
Show all the dragons side
yeah, here's the
on,
Audubon
or-
book
yeah.
for dragons
That would have been
or
cool.
something.
Like I would have. I kind of would have liked that art more. I like the art as is because I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy
yeah,
nerd.
it's good art. I think
But-
it's the worst out of the three, and probably because of that
Correct.
fantasy element.
Correct.
And I think the last thing for me that's a pretty significant con is that whereas we mentioned Wingspan is good for all gaming groups, Wyrmspan I do not think is a game that translates well to newer players.
Yeah.
And the
Agreed.
biggest reason is because your
it's crunchy.
sequencing and your economy is incredibly important. And if you don't know what's coming, then you're going to be like taking your sixth turn while everyone else is taking their
Right.
eighth and ninth turns.
Well,
Like,
and,
it's
and
kind
as
of
we
real.
found, I think that's also a negative mark against it, where all players at the table for Wyrmspan need to be the same skill level or the same intensity.
It's for
versus
gamers.
yeah,
100%
versus
for
the
gamers.
Yeah.
or you need to
That's
sit
fair.
4 newer players together at a Wyrmspan.
Yeah, my casual ass doesn't care for it.
Yeah. Because like there is no building a pretty pattern in Wyrmspan.
No.
There is very much you have to go in with a plan and execute on the plan.
Yeah, now if the art was like, what's that game where
Which
you
one?
play the little dragons with the markets?
Flamecraft.
Oh, yeah,
Flamecraft?
yeah.
Oh,
Flamecraft.
if
the
that
art
game
was
were
Flamecraft,
Flamecraft's art,
I would like
then
that
it would
better.
bring some of that element back.
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
Dude, if they
That'd
would
be
have
very
gone
cute.
the Flamecraft method, sorry if any of the developers of any of these
Yeah,
games
whoever-
ever watch this,
whoever-
if it would have gone the
Whoever did
Flamecraft
the art,
way,
I'm sorry if we're ripping you.
And
'cause
done-
it's good art.
It is good, but
but
It's
if they
okay.
would have gone like the Flamecraft, even like theming, and had you like getting
it
dragons
was
and using them
cartoony
to
and
make
cute,
new
like,
things,
yeah, I can see that.
I think that would have been a better game too.
Yeah. All right, so
Yeah.
let's hit. Does anyone else have any like closing thoughts on Wyrm before we kick into Finspan?
I think the faster we move on from Wyrmspan, the better for everybody, including the viewer.
I'm ready to move on.
All right, cool. So last we want to talk about Finspan, which is going to be the last of our Fin.
What a
A
treat.
return to form.
What a
I agree.
treat.
I agree with the return to form.
My entire review.
So I want to pose a question that I want to pose.
Video just ends.
The video ends again. I want to pose a thought that I posed to you guys earlier and kind of get your thoughts now that we've finished playing the game. And that's when I first read a
I
review
forgot
of
what you
this
said.
game, it was, they called it a streamlined version of Wingspan. And when I first was done playing my first game of it, I'm like, okay, I kind of get that. But also, the more I thought about it, the more I kind of rethought that position a little bit. But I want to hear what you guys have to say.
I think that's a valid call, but I don't think that's a review in its entirety.
Right.
Oh, no.
For sure.
That's a box blizzard.
There's
Yeah.
parts of it, you turn the board sideways and it's a little bit easier. It flows a little bit better because it's a little bit less restrictive.
This almost might be the best introductory of the Span games, just because it's a little easier on the complexity side, at least for me, as the non-board gamer of the group.
I think it helps a little bit on the balance. We didn't mention this in like the criticism of Wingspan, but we did originally, so maybe it's in the original video, but where like the meadow is more powerful than
yes,
the other
correct.
two.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of addressed with this because like the part where you're
The
hatching X isn't as much. You draw more cards than you do because that's a problem in Wingspan where it's really hard to get cards sometimes. And if you want cards, you have to develop your wetlands. And if you develop your wetlands, you're falling behind somewhere else. So they kind of address that. They kind of address where, you're not just laying a bunch of eggs and getting a ton of points on the one, and then
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels a little bit more balanced, like the different rows.
Yeah. And I think so. So as I played a couple of games, and the more I thought about it, so the original thought of like it's streamlined or has less complexity comes from the fact that whereas in Wingspan and Wyrmspan, you have 4 actions, or like you have 4 different actions you're taking throughout the game.
Yeah.
In Finspan, you have 2. You're either playing fish or you're diving. That's it. But as I thought about like how you spend resources in Finspan, so whereas in Wing and Wyrm, you're getting your food, you're spending your food. In Finspan, you are using cards as resources. You're using eggs as resources more to play your fish. You have to manage your young and your schools of fish, and the eating of fish is much different than it is in Wingspan. So I think that's where the complexity really manifests itself, is instead of being the different types of actions you're taking, it's resource management and action economy, I think are the biggest pieces of complexity in this game.
Yeah, and it also addresses the food type where you're rolling for different foods.
Yeah.
Like that's gone out of this too. So
You are almost entirely in your own world. Occasionally there's the alls, like John had an all.
Yeah. Everybody gets to hatch an egg.
Like that,
Yeah.
you can rely on that a little bit, especially if your opponent places it in a really vital column. You can kind of rely on them.
I think you do still have the variance in what you can draw.
Yes.
Yes.
As we saw by like your 81 point board versus my 35.
Just because I had a whale shark and a great white shark.
You had like 8 cards that were worth more than anything I drew the whole game.
Yeah.
True.
So and that's not a complaint, but it's like a subtle like that part feels more variant than it does in Wingspan.
But yeah, and I think that goes back to that whole like any game that has card draw or deck building kinds of elements. I mean, not that this is a deck builder because it's not, but it always has that variability of where the cards come. Mm-hmm. And what I like about that sometimes is that when any game that has card draw, every turn becomes a puzzle. Like you have to figure out how to use your resources based on what's coming to you, and it can be a feel bad when you're getting just stone nothing, right? But it makes you think every single turn about, I now have these resources. How do I change my sequence? How do I change my resource management to move everything into the area it needs to be?
I don't know if the variance is stark enough for me to consider it a feel bad in here. I was impressed by the difference because I didn't know there was anything that was expensive. So I looked over and I was like, what? Where's, what is that? The shark, I was like, oh, that's worth 10. That's crazy. And then you have a 12 down there.
The problem was I was also not finding any of these actions you guys were taking. So I could not use the action economy.
I don't think that's a feel bad in this game. It can be in a lot of games, but I don't think it is in this one unless you're a try hard or a bad sport. I mean, it's certainly, And maybe I'm wrong on that too. That may be an unfair criticism. Some people may just be like, I wish it was a little less variant. And I think that's fair.
Well, but I think that can be a strength because if you look at how, like, if you watch our video playthrough, which is going to be posted, of course. So I won the game with 134 points, and my board is very engine-y. Like I've got a lot of powers that fire off when I dove. Nick had less engine.
I had no engine. I had 2 whole actions.
Yeah, you had a little, just a very little bit.
Right? He has 1 card with activated.
Yeah,
I have 2 actions and I ate one of those fish.
But then a lot of his was just the raw number of points he was able to put out onto his board,
and then
his end game.
Yeah,
my play actions.
You both played the cards that you were dealt.
Yeah. So they were 2 very different.
Turn right. I could have had you, but
you almost did. But there were 2 very different ways the game came to us.
You failed.
But
I'm always a bridesmaid.
Yeah, but it was 134 to 131 games, or 131 points in the game. So despite the fact that we had very different experiences playing this game and playing through our resources,
absolutely.
It was very, very close. It's not like there was an optimal strategy here for us. It was just a super close game.
Fish.
It's late.
It is late, and
doing it. Yep.
I'm slowly infecting you all with fish.
All right, so we got three pretty distinct games here that we obviously have some strong opinions
Which one was
about.
your favorite?
Yeah, exactly. Which one's your favorite? Let's just go through it. Nick, you're off camera.
I'll start. Wingspan. Right. I think the original's my favorite just because A, I like birds a little bit more, and B, it has more content with expansions. I think Finspan will catch it with more expansions and adding more fish.
Yeah, John?
I think as a new player, Finspan probably spoke to me more in terms of ease of entry Otherwise, a very, very, very close second, if not tied, Wingspan. And I would not play Wyrmspan again.
Okay.
I really like Finspan, and Wyrmspan is too Wingspan is too established for Finspan to just
Right.
immediately take it.
Right.
So it being a new game, it would be hard to pick that as the favorite. But it is very good. I do think most people are going to relate to birds more than fish,
Yeah.
so that's an edge in its favor. But not having the dice was kind of nice, to be honest.
One
Yeah.
might say it's an
Yep.
egg in its favor. instead of an edge.
So
I don't know why one would say that though.
Just drop a D.
yeah, I'm not going to say anything controversial. I mean, I think it's Wingspan by a hair, like
by a wing,
Yeah.
by
By a feather.
by a beak.
Eh,
So, if I were had to but for me, it's so close because if I was giving them numerical value, I'd say for me, Wingspan is like a 9 game. Like it's
I'd say 9.5.
it's an excellent game.
It's definitely up there.
For me so far, Finn is an 8.5, and then I'd probably put Wyrm at like a 7.
Same.
Like totally fine, respectable game that I wouldn't feel bad playing. But those two, I think, are just clearly a cut above it.
I'd give Wyrmspan a 6.3.
Hey everyone, Future Rick here, and one of the things that we did when we did our after discussion about this particular episode, and as we're still trying to find our voice around how to make content and how to kind of talk about and structure some of our discussions, we realized that we left out a pretty critical point in discussing all 3 of these games. We had a pretty productive discussion on our Discord channel, and I wanted to come back and give you kind of some of the outlines of that discussion. So one of the things that we alluded to as we're talking through all the Span games is we talked a lot about where they fit in collections. Because when we talk about these games, giving them 1 to 10 ratings, 0 to 5, 5 stars, S through F tier, however we choose to do it, well, I think one of the things that gets left out is not just how good the game is, but also kind of where it slots in a collection and where kind of how we feel about it as part of your collection. Because for various reasons, like you don't have enough room or an understanding spouse or the money to sink into a big game collection, you just might be forced to make some choices about the types of games that you add, what you have to delete, and really what all you're putting into it. So I wanted to do just a few minutes to end this video out talking about where we felt these games kind of fell as potential parts of your overall board gaming collection. So first, talking about Wingspan, a lot of really great things about Wingspan that make it an excellent addition to your collection. I think it's kind of a bedrock game, like a cornerstone game of any collection, and it boils down to me in just a few ways about that. First, it has very broad appeal. It's pretty easy in terms of a gateway game. It groks for a lot of people, and just has like that really broad appeal, really like easy to get it to the table. The expansions for Wingspan also give you a lot of the replayability and a lot of the variance in gameplay in just a few more boxes that you really might like in a game that is going to be added to your collection, that you might bring out quite a bit, and that really gives you a lot of bang for your buck and bang for your space. For Wyrmspan, though, we liked a lot of things about the game. Aside from John, he really did not like his Wyrmspan experience at all, if you couldn't tell. Things like the action economy were very good. Some of the additional mechanics add a little bit of crunch. Some of the additional mechanics are just kind of there and don't really add much to the overall experience of the game. Also, they really add to the complexity rating, which doesn't at all make it a bad game or one that you shouldn't play, but it really kind of makes you curate it, like if you're bringing it to your table or taking it to your friend's house, putting it in your bag. What's the gaming group that you're playing with in a way that I don't think the other 2 Span games really have. So it's just one of those games that I think it has a place in some collections alongside something like Wingspan if the additional mechanics are something that really speak to you and you have the kind of gaming group that really supports having Wing and Wyrmspan in your collection. For Finspan, this is a tough one for me, honestly, because while I like Finspan more as a game, I don't know that it brings enough to a collection at the moment to distinguish it from Wyrmspan and Wingspan. And I'll tell you why. Because with Wingspan, we have the broad appeal of birds. And I mean, I'm a fish person. I get it. So if you're a fish person too, and you're yelling at your screen that, oh my God, no, fish are so much better, I'm with you. But so many of the people I've talked to about the games, really the bird theme really just speaks to them. And I think that for like Nick and Chad and John, that was something for them too. and it has a lot of really nice. There's a lot of really nice iterations coming off of Wingspan, whereas Wyrmspan feels like a game that someone took Wingspan and bolted on some additional mechanics. Finspan feels a lot to me like a game that takes the DNA of Wingspan and creates something that is it's kind of a different experience while sharing a lot of that DNA. Like, you know, you're playing a span game when you pick up Finspan. The negative for me at the moment is going to be replayability, because it does not have the expansions right now that Wingspan has. So you don't have like freshwater fish or mammals or any of those things. I mean, it's an infinitely expandable game. There's lots of different sorts of fish and marine creatures that you can add to the game, and I think there's a lot of things to mine there. And even the rulebook itself speaks about potential future expansions. But they're not there yet, and it's going to really depend on, I think, sales to determine what kind of additional content we're going to get in the Finspan space. So, like, when looking at Wingspan and Finspan, it's going to come down a lot to how do you feel about the flavor of the games? Are you a bird person? Are you a fish person? What kind of speaks to you there? How often do you think you'll be playing these games? And how much do you really want that different kind of replayability? And ultimately, how much is it going to come to the table? Because that's really what it should be. The main measurement of any game that you bring in and keep in your collection is how often am I going to get this to the table? Does my gaming group enjoy it? Do I enjoy it? And that should really be your biggest rubric. So ultimately, when we're looking at all three of these games, I think the best collection starter or best feature of a collection is going to be Wingspan. I think if you're looking for something that has a lot more crunch and different kinds of mechanics, and you really know your gaming group is going to enjoy it, I think a good choice is Wyrmspan, but I'd still recommend Wingspan first. And then if you are just a fish person, if you like the different, like the simplified but not really simple mechanics of Finspan, and it really speaks to you, then Finspan, I think, is a great choice for your collection. Now, if you're a little like me, who we've made a lot of degenerate jokes about me, and you can see the shelves behind me, I've got space. I've got an understanding spouse who lets me get away with some of this nonsense. So I think there's an argument for all three to be in your collection. But if you are lacking the space, or are lacking the ability to get some of these games to the table, I would kind of go on those recommendations. I would say, for me at least, Wingspan is an excellent investment of a game. Wyrmspan, you really have to know your audience and really have to enjoy the additional mechanics that it brings to the table. And with Finspan, I just love fish, and I love the evolution of what the Span games have brought to us so far. So if I'm adding it, I'm going Wing, Fin, and Wyrm. But as always, you should play what makes you happy, and you should play the things that you think you're really going to respond to. So check out our playthroughs of all the Span games that are posted on our channel, and some of our commentary that goes along with it. Please leave us a like or subscribe if you found something useful about this video, or it kind of motivated you to get into one of the Span games. And overall, just have a great time gaming and responsible time drinking. Good night.
We work behind, pull up a chair.